welcome to another episode of RGU Talk. I'm Julia, and today we'll be talking all things RGU accommodation. Keep listening to find out more about our various accommodation sites, the benefits of staying with us, the services we offer, and more about the student experience of living in RGU accommodation. On the podcast today, I'm joined by Sandra, our Accommodation Services Manager, Ross, our Res Life Coordinator, and Frankie, a current RGU student living in our accommodation. So let's get started. Hi Sandra, Ross and Frankie, it's lovely to have you on the podcast today. How are you all?
Hi Julia, good thanks. Thanks for having us on the podcast today.
Yeah, good, thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Fab. So let's get started then. Sandra, I wonder if you could start by telling us a bit more about the 4 accommodation sites that RGU offers.
Sure, Julia. Well, here at RGU, we're really keen to encourage new students to consider living in RGU accommodation and to choose that as their option for when they come to university. I'll start by talking about our biggest accommodation site and work my way down to the smallest. So Women Hill Flats, which is in the heart of Aberdeen city centre, is where we accommodate the majority of our residents. It's a large site, it's got over 700 bedrooms, and it's really, really popular with everyone, first year students, postgraduate students and returning students. At Women Hill, we've got a mix of standard bedrooms with single beds, standard bedrooms with double beds, and also some ensuite bedrooms. The flats here are for 6 or 8 residents. They share communal lounges and kitchens, and in flats which are not ensuite, the bathroom facilities are also shared. One of the main reasons why Women Hill is so popular is because of where it's located. Being so central, it's within easy walking distance of the main shopping areas in Aberdeen, as well as being close to all the popular bars, cafes and restaurants. Many of our students take on part-time evening and weekend jobs in the city centre and find that having accommodation at Women Hill means that they never have to worry about getting to and from work, particularly at unsociable times. They can just walk. They can just walk where they need to go because it's just so central. Women Hill has a dedicated team of reception staff, janitors and cleaners, all of whom are there to look after our residents during their stay. We also have a night team who are there to provide assistance to residents and to help provide additional security overnight. And despite its large size, Women Hill has a real sense of community. Time and time again, we hear stories from former students about how they met their best friends, their future flatmates, and even their future husbands and wives at Women Hill. Everyone gets to know everyone there, and because of the diverse backgrounds of the residents, it's a very cosmopolitan environment and a great way to meet people from all different cultures and who are studying a wide variety of courses. However, if anyone feels that Women Hill is perhaps not the right choice for them, maybe because they would feel more comfortable at a smaller site or because they would like to be closer to campus, then they might want to consider Crathy Student Village, which is a modern complex for 96 residents, and it's located about a 20-minute walk from the Garthy campus. It's also on a bus route for anyone who prefer not to take that 20-minute walk. We've got flats here which accommodate between 4 and 8 residents, and all the bedrooms here are ensuite. We've also got some rooms here which are fully accessible, so they're ideal for students who have mobility issues, including wheelchair users. Crathy is around a 15-minute bus journey into the city centre, and for those who like to get out and about, it's also within easy walking distance of Duthie Park with its famous winter gardens, and also the old Deeside Railway, which is now a popular path for people who want to do some walking and cycling. One of the common questions we get asked by prospective students about what accommodation they can apply for is from people who want to stay within the campus grounds. The answer to that question is that we do only have a small number of rooms on campus, and these are the round and square towers, which are both located up towards the far west end of the campus. We've got 30 rooms in the round tower and 19 rooms in the square tower, making a total of 49 rooms altogether. The flats have 5 bedrooms with partial ensuite facilities, which means that each student has their own sink and shower, but the toilets are shared. Both towers have a common room at the top where you can get fantastic views right down the Dee Valley. The round and square towers are really popular with students who want to be able to just walk to their lectures and who prefer to live in a quiet location. but demand for these is always very high because of their location. And it's also worth mentioning that because of the quirky and unusual design of the round tower, which includes built-in beds, it's not really suitable for people who are tall. So we'd encourage prospective students to bear this in mind when they're making their application. And the last accommodation site that I can talk to you about today is Ramsay Development. It's a very small site, only with 28 bedrooms, and it's purely for postgraduate students or undergraduate students who are over the age of 21. It's in a pleasant residential area, just about a 5-minute walk from campus, and it's extremely popular with mature students who want a quiet place to live where they can focus on their studies and be only a short distance away from the library and all the other on-campus facilities. All the rooms at Ramsay have ensuite facilities, and the flats range in size, the smallest being 3 residents and the largest being 6. And we also have a small number of fully accessible rooms here, which are suitable for students who have mobility issues. And again, that includes wheelchair users. So to sum up, those are our 4 accommodation sites: Woman Hill Flats, Crathy Student Village, the Roundon Square Towers, and Ramsay Development. Students can tell us when making their application which of these sites they would prefer. And although we can't make an absolute guarantee, we always do our very best to offer students their first or their second choice whenever we can.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sandra. There's so much choice for students, depending on their interests and what they're looking for from their accommodation. So great to hear all about that. You might have touched on this slightly, but I just wondered if you could tell us a bit more about some of the benefits of choosing RGU accommodation.
Well, I don't know where to start. There's so many benefits to living in university accommodation, Julia. Firstly, and most importantly to many of our residents, is the knowledge that if they choose our accommodation, then they will be living with other RGU students. And many students, especially if it's going to be their first time away from home, might feel a little nervous or anxious about moving into student accommodation. And I think it really helps them to know that they'll be sharing with other students who feel exactly the same way, who'll be studying on the same campus, and who will probably even be catching the same bus in the mornings. And accommodation services here at RGU, our team, we take great care to try and allocate students to a flat where they're going to feel comfortable with their flatmates. And so we don't use a computer program to allocate our rooms. Each and every single application form is read by an actual person who will then use their experience and their judgment to allocate them appropriately. Of course, despite our best efforts, there are always occasions where a dynamic in a flat doesn't work out. But even when this happens, we can help by being on hand to work with students to find a solution, such as a move to a different flat where they're going to feel more comfortable. When students sign up for a lease with RGU Accommodation, they have the certainty of knowing exactly what they will have to pay, and this is an extremely important benefit of living in university accommodation. There are not any hidden surprises, such as huge energy bills. The rent that you pay to live in university accommodation will include all your utility costs, all of your high-speed internet access, your contents and students, your cleaning and your maintenance, and a lease length, which is approximately going to coincide with the period of your studies. This all represents excellent value for money, but residents do sometimes find themselves struggling financially, and RGU Accommodation is willing to work with these students, for example, by extending the due date of a payment or by creating a personal payment plan, which will be easier for students to stick to. Not all private landlords will be this flexible, and sometimes students living in private accommodation who find themselves with financial issues end up in a very stressful situation. Accommodation Services is a dedicated accommodation finance administrator who can provide assistance, advice, and solutions to try and help residents who are in financial difficulty. And when a student decides to live in RGU accommodation, the lease they're signing is directly with RGU Accommodation Services. And there are several reasons why students should not underestimate the importance of this. For example, every year we have residents who decide that the course they've chosen is not for them and they decide to leave university. I mean, of course, no one comes to university expecting to leave only after a short time, but it does happen. So it's reassuring to know that RGU will terminate your lease in these instances and payment will not be required beyond the date on which the keys are returned. Unfortunately, there are some private accommodation providers out there who will continue to hold students to their lease, even if they leave university and are no longer using their accommodation. So this is something really worth considering when deciding who your landlord's going to be. And one further benefit I'm going to mention today, and this is the last one from me, because I know Ross is waiting in the wings to speak about fantastic services provided by our ResLife team, is the safety, security and peace of mind that our residents have. All of our sites have secure entry systems, most are covered by CCTV, and all residents have access to 24/7 assistance and welfare support. Residents can rest assured that any maintenance issues will be dealt with quickly, and all of this leaves them with a few less things to worry about, with more time to spend thinking about studying, socialising, and generally enjoying their RGU university accommodation experience.
Wow, thank you, Sandra. There's so many benefits of choosing RGU accommodation, and it's clear in what you just said now that students really are at the heart of the offering. So that's wonderful to hear. You mentioned about ResLife and ResLife being one of the big benefits of choosing RGU accommodation as well. So Ross, I just wondered if you could tell us a bit more about ResLife and the services you offer.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much. So I think we're all aware that coming to university is probably one of the most exciting experiences for students, but it can also sometimes be quite an anxious one as well. Obviously, a lot of students are in a new city, living with new people, and is that kind of first time away from home for the majority of our, especially freshers. So ResLife's role is really to help bridge that gap, be that kind of support for students as they move into new accommodation and start to live with new people. So the primary focus of ResLife is in RGU accommodation, as Sandra's talked about as well. So we have a team of over 20 student members of our ResLife team. They're both in the residences side and the community side of the teams that we have. And their job is really to help support their fellow students. You'll hear from Frankie as well after I've spoken, who is a member of our team at the Ramsey development. But their job is really to put on things like events. They put on site events. They provide out of hours support. So if a student locks himself out, if a student's maybe feeling slightly homesick, or really just needs someone to talk to and would like to find out a bit more about the support available at RGU, that's what the ResLife team is there for. They're there to be that kind of proactive support, going round the flats and meeting students, but then also being that reactive support if a student requires kind of assistance. And especially at some of the smaller sites, they provide that out of hours support when there's not on-site overnight support from RGU staff as well. Some of the other work that ResLife do generally as well is that kind of general welfare support across the university. In recent times, especially during COVID-19, ResLife have provided support to predominantly students living in RGU accommodation, but then also other students who are having to isolate who may need support. We've also been supporting international students that arrive. So students, when they did have to isolate or go into quarantine, and they might have needed things like groceries, or to find out some more information about support available, or just about when their kind of lectures are, where their inductions are, ResLife were able to provide that level of support as well. Outside of that side of things, we've also do quite a lot of work in terms of that building of a community. So we've talked about within RGU halls building community. Outside of that, and of course available to those in RGU halls as well, but we put on some larger trips and events. So just last week, for example, some of our students went away to Glasgow on a bus trip, and we put on lots of other events throughout the year as well. And on top of the events that our site teams host, kind of in the RGU accommodation sites. And then we also do some work around community engagement. So really looking at opportunities for our students, especially those living in RGU accommodation, to engage with other community groups, community centres, local groups and things like that as well. And the last part of ResLife's role is we're aware that for some students, especially those, for example, who may want to live with family, the RGU accommodation isn't always the option for them. So we're able to provide support for students living in alternative sectors too. We've got some teams in some of the private halls, and we're also able to provide that advice and support for students on things like leases on alternative sectors of accommodation, and really just that general welfare support throughout their time at the university.
Thanks, Ross, for talking us through that. I think it's so good to hear how much support is provided to our students when they're living in RGU accommodation. You mentioned about social activities, and I know this is such an important part of university life, and especially for people that are moving away from home for the first time and living in a new city. I wondered if you could just tell us a bit more about some of those social activities that Res Life has organised.
Yeah, of course. So I think that's exactly it. As I said before, it's really about that kind of building of a community, allowing students to come together to meet other students, maybe outside of their course, outside of their immediate flat. So throughout the year, we run regular ticketed events, we call them, so trips away. So for example, as I said, we just had a coach full of students go down to Glasgow, to Buchanan Street. They got to go and see, some of them went to Kelvin Grove art galleries and some of the other kind of key sites in Glasgow. And at Christmas time, we take students down to the Edinburgh Christmas Market, the kind of world-renowned Christmas market that's there. So we take students down there. Some local trips, things like bowling, going to the cinema and things like that, just really opportunities for students to leave the accommodation, to meet other people, and to kind of get to know the city and the wider kind of key cities in Scotland and tourist attractions. In terms of on our sites, and especially in our RGU accommodation sites, our teams also host events every month, every few weeks. We've had things like pumpkin carving, which we do every year, which gets some great nominations and submissions from students. We do a Valentine's Day event where students can send each other a rose and some other stuff. We do events around Easter and around Christmas, and whether that's just providing kind of that opportunity for students to come together where they're there over Christmas or when they're there over summer, when a lot of other students may have gone home. So these types of things. And then our site teams also host events such as grab and goes during exams, so students can get those healthy breakfasts in when they're maybe rushing around and up quite late studying. They put on movie nights and games nights and just other events like that where students can all come together within accommodation to meet each other and to meet those outside of their immediate flats.
That's so cool, Ross. I want to come on some of these trips. Frankie, as a current RGU student and someone that's currently living in RGU accommodation, I wonder if you could just tell us what the highlights been of living in RGU accommodation.
Yeah, totally. So a lot of this is going to sound like some of the stuff that Sandra was saying because she was pretty much spot on. For me and for a lot of my other flatmates, one of the highlights has been being able to meet other people from different cultures. So I'm in Ramsey, which is postgraduate and mature students, and so we have a lot of different different people coming here from different backgrounds to do their masters and postgraduates here. And so it's been interesting being able to learn different things from them, foods, games, just about their cultures in general. It's almost like we've become sort of like a family, and we've been introduced to their families when they've been on video calls in the kitchens and stuff like that. And it's just amazing to see all these different perspectives from the world.
Thank you, Frankie. I really like that notion of feeling like you're a family because that's so important as well if people are away from home. I just wonder, do you have any tips for students thinking about choosing RGU accommodation?
I remember reading this question and all of a sudden I started thinking about all these things that I wish I had known or had thought about before coming here. So I'm just gonna run through a few of them. Essentially, the first one, and it's gonna sound so small and so basic, but was bringing with me something to eat on the first night that was easy enough to cook, because moving in is such like a big overwhelming task, and getting to know everybody, it's just about being in the kitchen. And so just having something easy like a quick pasta meal to cook or something like that was just would have been like an absolute lifesaver. I mean, obviously you've got the other options as well, like takeout and stuff like that, but that just wasn't the sort of vibe that my flat was giving off, and we're all about like cooking and stuff like that in our flat. There is also other things such as icebreakers. So my flat, we've collected slowly but surely, we've collected card games, board games, things like Monopoly and um, things like LePlunk and stuff like that, just like random board games, which is like a brilliant icebreaker. So like if we're all feeling a bit stressed or a bit crazed with our coursework, we all slowly just like migrate to the kitchen and we end up playing these games. And it's just like, so like bringing along something like that is a brilliant way to break the ice when you first meet. Not secondly, thirdly is bringing decorations. So I remember first moving in the first week here, I didn't have anything, and the rooms can feel so plain. And so having something here, just like family photos, really, really helps. And lastly, apply to Res Life. I think being part of Res Life has honestly been such an amazing thing. I've gotten to know different people from different sites as well. So like I still talk to people from Woolman Hill that I met on the first week of training, when we see each other in passing. So like if I'm on the bus through to the city centre, sometimes people get on from the Karathi site that I know, and it's just amazing being able to like say hi to these people and speak to them, and also just being able to help out other people. So like being able to give advice and just help in general, especially when like people are feeling homesick and stuff. It's just nice to make them feel welcome.
Thank you, Frankie. I love how practical your first tip was about bringing food.
Oh yeah, totally.
Love it. And I think a lot of what you're saying is around building those connections with people. And I think that's such a strong positive benefit of staying in RGU accommodation. It helps you to create these lifelong friendships as well. And finally, Frankie, just a question for you. What's your favourite thing about living in Aberdeen?
I think my favourite thing is Aberdeen isn't one of these bigger cities. It's slightly smaller, which means that everything is so much closer together, which means ease of access to things is so good. So obviously, like you've got all the parks and the greenery, the river, and then for me, a 15-minute bus journey into the city centre for things like bowling, the cinema. There's like the Axe Throne that's just opened up as well, which is like it's so good to be able to have access to all these things.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big sells is how compact the city is, but also how close it is to the coast and the countryside. There's so much to see and do at the weekends or after you're finished studying. So it really is a cosmopolitan place.
Yeah, 100%.
Fab. So thank you all for taking the time to talk to RGU Talk today. When you stay in RGU accommodation, you'll be at the heart of student life. You're guaranteed to be in accommodation with only RGU students, so it won't take long before you meet someone that is living on your floor, studying the same course as you, or riding the bus to uni with you. Our accommodation is full of people just like you. The great thing about staying in RGU accommodation is that you can make lifelong connections and amazing friends for life. You can find out even more information about RGU accommodation at rgu.ac.uk/accommodation. See you next time, and remember to follow us on social media.